Hi everyone, welcome back to yet another episode of Poems That Changed Me. Yes, it's true, this crazy project continues. Today's poem is by a phenomenally talented, but I think undeservedly underrated writer named Julia de Burgos. And the poem itself is called To Julia de Burgos. I came across this poem in a wonderful anthology edited by Alicia Ostreicher called The Other Voice, Global Poetry by Women. And I think I got this in grad school. It's an anthology of poems by women from around the globe, many of whom, of course, just did not get the recognition they deserved because of gender. And this poem really jumped out at me, and it's one of my students' all-time favorite poems when I teach this. So here is Julia de Burgos, To Julia de Burgos in Spanish, Julia de Burgos. The word is out that I am your enemy, that in my poetry I am giving you away. They lie, Julia de Burgos. They lie, Julia de Burgos. That voice that rises in my poems is not yours. It is my voice. You are the covering and I the essence, and between us lies the deepest chasm. You are the frigid doll of social falsehood, and I the virile sparkle of human truth. You are the honey of courtly hypocrisy, not I. I bear my heart in all my poems. You are selfish, like your world, not I. I gamble everything to be what I am. You are but the grave ladylike, not I. I am life and strength, and I am woman. You belong to your husband, your master, not I. I belong to no one or to everyone, because to all, I give myself in pure feelings and in my thoughts. You curl your hair and paint your face, not I. I am curled by the wind, painted by the sun. You are lady of the house, resigned and meek to the prejudice of men, not I. I am Rocinante, running headlong, smelling the horizons of the justice of God. There's so much to like in that poem. God, I love that last stanza. So one of the things that this poem changed for me was this notion of writing a poem that speaks to yourself, but not to your poet self. I think oftentimes poems that sort of talk to the poet, they talk to the poet. But in this poem, what de Burgos does is really interesting. She writes a poem to speak to the other Julia de Burgos, the false Julia de Burgos. So it's the poet self, the authentic self, speaking to the other self. And my female students love this poem because it really encapsulates some of the, obviously unfair gender dynamics that women are forced to face and find themselves in all the time. This unfair double standard that women feel they have to embody, that are outward facing to please other women or men or society or religion or whatever. And then there's the inner, more authentic self that is the true self, that is bold, that is not meek, that does not follow social conventions, that flips the bird at the expectations of men and other women and religion and society and whatever. And I love that bravery. I often talk with my students about W.E. Du Bois's notion of social consciousness, of double consciousness, the sense that African Americans feel like there's two consciousnesses, the individual consciousness that sort of exists in the world, but then this doubling, this splitting of the self that is always already looking at themselves simultaneously how white people see them. And my female students often talk about how the same is true for women, that they see themselves the way they see themselves, but they are always aware of being looked at, or they are hyper aware of how they might appear to men, to the male gaze. And Julia de Burgos, who was born, I'm going to say 1914, died 1953, writing early part of the 20th century in a patriarchal Catholic country in Spanish, is really aware of this at a really important time. And I love how this poem, largely in couplets, so that the form, the twinning, the doubling, re-encodes the message that he's sending, is making a claim for poetry, that the poetic self is the authentic self, and that self is non-gendered, non-binary. I also love the claim at the end that the poet self is Rocinante, and for those of you who don't know, that is Don Quixote's horse in Don Quixote. And it's this kind of straggled old mare, which is a kind of double for Don Quixote. Himself illogical and dreamlike and perhaps a little bit insane. And so what I love is that this poem is an apology for the poet and for poetry and the poet's authenticity. I remember reading this as a young man and just feeling overwhelmed by the brilliance and the power of this poet and poem, and I hope you feel similarly.